Hi, everybody. It's Lauren and Belma. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Attach to a Purpose, Not a Job Title. If you guys can see us and hear us, let us know in the live chat. If this is your very first Career Contessa webinar, welcome. Thanks for your guys' flexibility while we rescheduled to this week. And if you are joining us in the live chat over here, or you're comfortable in the live chat, feel free to share where you are joining from. You can see that people are already very comfortable in doing that. That's awesome. I'm in the Career Contessa office here in Los Angeles by myself. Don't worry, I am very socially distanced. There's no one in this space. And Belma, where are you joining us from?
Hi, everyone. I'm joining from my apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey. So
nice. So we've got a lot to cover. So while you guys are doing introductions and saying hello in the chat, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping items in case this is your very first webinar. So again, my name is Lauren McGowan. I'm the founder and CEO of Career Contessa. These webinars always have a replay that will be emailed out to you afterwards. So if you have to leave early, no worries about that. You guys are obviously very comfortable with the live chat. And then if you have any questions, Belma and I are trying to do about half an hour on content, half an hour for questions. Like right underneath us over here, it says ask a question. Put your question in there and then upvote the ones that you have that are similar. And then what we will do is we'll make sure that we record our answers to your questions. So if you're watching a replay or anything like that, you don't have to watch the whole thing if you just want to listen to our answer to your question or anything like that. Okay, Belma, I want to start with introductions because a lot of people might remember you from like maybe not even a month. Wait, so you did a webinar. So, okay, let me get my words right. Everybody, Belma McCaffrey is the CEO and founder of Work Bigger, an incredible organization that helps you with all the career stuff. But I think that more importantly, you help people with the really hard career stuff, which is all the internal pieces of careers, like purpose, finding your purpose, determining, what it is that you want to do kind of from this inside place, which is very, very hard work. But Belma joined us for a webinar right when the coronavirus outbreak happened, and it was about how to manage your career during crisis and uncertainty. So if you haven't watched that webinar, it's awesome, and we had to have Belma back. So Belma, do a proper introduction of who you are and today's topic and why you wanted to teach on this.
yeah, and thank you again, Lauren, and everyone for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So proper introduction. I run a company called Work Bigger, and our mission is really to help you do work you love that makes a difference in the world without burning out. So exactly what Lauren said, we focus heavily on impact, purpose, mission, whatever you want to call it, and also mindset and well-being, because I really believe you can't reach your full potential. You can't go out there and do the work you want to do if you're feeling terrible and burning out, which I see happening all the time. And we do that. We have a group coaching membership where we offer coaching and career resources to make career support affordable and accessible. And I also work with clients privately, one-on-one. I'm trained as a coach with the Neuro Leadership Institute and tend to bring a lot of neuroscience into leadership development and my conversations. And I'm like a very big picture thinker. So the neuroscience kind of like brings me back down to earth and helps me like make everything practical, because this work is really difficult sometimes to manage and work through because it's so internal. But yeah, this topic, attaching to a purpose versus a job, is so important to me because it's something I needed like years ago, back in my 20s, when I spent so many years looking for that right job and really asking the wrong question of like, what is that one job that's going to give me all the things? It's going to give me the money. It's going to give me the personal fulfillment. It's going to give me the growth that I'm looking for. And it wasn't working. So, just through this work, I realized we really need to dig deeper and attach to something bigger that's not as fleeting, right? Because, and we can, talk a little bit more about that. But the second reason that this topic feels especially relevant today is, we see all of everything that's going on in the world. And I think connecting to your purpose and your mission is really about leadership development. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that too, Lauren, how we show up in the world, given the new world that we're in now and how things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. I think values are, I think at the beginning of coronavirus, there was sort of this talk about values from the standpoint of like, how do you value your time? I think that was a big one for people. But I think that, we're literally in a for me, it's almost like a revolution that's happening in a positive way. With social justice and racial equality. And so I think we're in this time where values are really, and whether it's at work, in your personal life, like I think we're in a really interesting time with that. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about how values show up. Like, why are they important? Like, and I thought you said something interesting before we got on the call, which is like, values can change and they adapt and evolve over time. And so I think that that's also something really important to recognize, is that this is sort of ongoing work. And just so you guys know, Belma has a framework on how to determine your purpose. And so we'll talk about that next, but I just kind of want to lay the groundwork a little bit around that first.
Yeah.
Like, why is purpose important? How does it like feed you more long-term,
Yeah. And I'd love to talk about it, like why it's so relevant now. And exactly when we got on the March webinar, we were talking about coronavirus. My call to action to everyone on the call was like, take this time to do the inner work, right? Especially if you've struggled to figure out what you want to do and you've struggled to figure out what fulfillment looks like for you in your career. And then now we're seeing everything happening with anti-racism, which is so powerful. And I want to call out I had this like epiphany this weekend that I want to share with you all, as I've been following the news and just have been like following the defunding the police conversation and trying to learn from that. And we saw that, Minneapolis now intends to defund the police. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, like for something like that to happen requires a big shift in values and societal values and a big mindset shift in leadership, right? And we don't have to talk about the specifics of, defunding the police and what that's going to look like. I'm sharing this example happening in our society and why that makes purpose so relevant right now more than ever, right? Because I think if we're going to go from shifting resources to things like mental health, right, which is part of the defunding police conversation, that's huge. Like that means that we're starting to operate from a place of possibility, from a place of healing, from a place of trust versus like a punishing place, right? Or a place of like, a place of fear. So I think traditionally what we see with like our systems and with leadership in general, like how people lead in the workplace is usually from a place of fear. And I think that's why workplace toxicity is so prominent too, right? And when we just think about like maternity leave policies, all of that, the toxicity that we experience as individuals from our immediate bosses when we don't feel heard, when we don't feel seen. And that is a leadership dilemma. And to really tackle that leadership dilemma, you have to first get clear on what your intention is as a human being, as a worker. What is the impact that you want to make in the workplace? What values do you want to live with, right? You really have to build that foundation and start from there before you get to the strategy and the tactics and the how and all of that.
Yeah, you guys let us know if that resonates with you in the chat. I have a question, it's in the chat, and I think this is actually a good time to kind of, I guess, talk about this in the sense of like, someone said in the chat that they feel like they find their purpose every day, and then all of a sudden it will be like, oh, now there's this other new exciting thing. And I think that this is the really challenging part for me, at least, is that ideally purpose and values sort of, they flow with all of that, right? So it's like, it's not about like finding a thing and stepping on the gas with just that one, that one thing. And I think anyway, I think that's definitely like one of the challenging parts, is that finding your purpose is not like attaching to a job title or a job task or a responsibility, right? Like, I mean, I guess my question is like, ideally you should be able to like find a new exciting thing tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and your purpose just goes with you with all those things, right?
Yes. And I want whoever wrote that in the comments, that's brilliant, because passion and interests are not your purpose. Okay, passion and interest, like that thing that you're excited about, that thing that you're excited to pursue, that's awesome, but that's not your purpose. The purpose actually almost comes like underneath the passion and the interest, right? Passion and interest can be part of your purpose. Your purpose anchors you on a bigger level. So I'll share an example from one of my members and clients who started working with us to like navigate her job search, and she like realized, she's like, wait, I need to take a step back and figure out what my mission is and then build from there. And hers is to make the world a better place through empathy and leadership, right? So it sounds very broad, and it's going to sound broad when you share it, but the point is it's enough to anchor you, right? It's enough to anchor your projects, and it's enough to anchor the opportunities that you seek, and you know what to say no to when you're going on job interviews or when you're applying for jobs, because you're like, this doesn't quite feel right, it doesn't align. So I want to differentiate between purpose and passion, because that's something we get wrong all the time. And you know, Lauren, when I like talk about the framework too, I think hopefully people will see like just the 3 steps that are required. Because that it's an important distinction, and I see too our members get like stuck with it all the time. They're like, oh, wait, I'm really into cooking, but like that, you know, I can't really parlay that into a career. And that's
right. I'm also going to link to an article we published yesterday. In full transparency, it's a recycled article. We've had it for a while, and it's about how to create a career mantra. And it's interesting because we also include the mantras from some companies that you guys know in there, as well as sort of examples. And it's very much kind of what you just said, Belma, where like they end up being really broad. Like, for example, Apple's mantra is think different, right? And so it's very broad, but that is sort of what your mission or your value is going to be too. So, okay, before we get into the 3-step framework, I just have 2 questions. One, what is the danger of attaching to a job title? Because I think a lot of us do that. I also have an awesome podcast episode that I'll link to you guys in the chat with Tess Viglin. She wrote this book called, I think it's called Leaving a Job, or like Plan B, Leaving a Job. Oh my God, now I don't remember what it is, but basically it's about Plan B, and it's like leaving a job without another job lined up. I feel so embarrassed. I can't remember the name right now. My brain is going crazy. But what she said is that, especially in America, part of why we're so attached to job titles is that in her research, usually the second question people ask is, what do you do, right? So we never ask people, what are your values? What's your mission? What's your mantra? That's, not something that we're being asked. And so I think that's also one of the challenges of attaching to a purpose, is that we're never asked, it's not like you're asked about this except in times like this. So I'll link to that in the chat as well. But yeah, tell us, like, psychologically, what are the dangers for your brain? You talked about neuroscience, like of attaching to a job title.
Yeah, so I'd love to explain it from that perspective, because it makes perfect sense why we do that. So, right, we don't go around saying like, hey there, my purpose is to like change the world, because it feels weird. Like when we talk about purpose and mission, it comes from a really deep emotional place, and it requires us to get emotional, and that's not how we operate day to day, right? We're working with our minds, and our minds crave certainty and tangible things. So a job title is very tangible, right? I work in marketing, or I'm a content creator. It gives people an opportunity, like, okay, well, I can picture that. I can't picture what it's going to look like when you go and change the world. Like what are the specifics of that? So just as human beings, we crave that type of certainty, and our brains, because they're computers, want like really tangible information. So, I share that because it makes perfect sense that we're looking to attach to a job title. It allows us to have conversations. We can explain what we do in a much easier way, right? So it makes perfect sense. The danger with that is that it's really not what we're looking for. A job title is fleeting, right? We see with the millennial generation, and this is going to continue to happen. We're not in one job forever. You're not gonna be, because as a human being, you're also constantly seeking growth, and you want to be challenged and you want to learn. So what you do is going to naturally change over time. It should, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're seeing change and growth. So that's why attaching to the job title, it just sets you up to fail in a sense, or it sets you up for disappointment, because it's not a forever thing. It's not supposed to be.
Right.
So,
so the first step is sort of just recognizing that, like, actually we are all maybe not even just hardwired, but also societally we are wired to be attached to a tangible thing, and the tangible thing is the job title. It's your position at work, your status, that kind of thing. And if you're doing that, it's almost like you're being held hostage by this thing that will change, isn't always in complete control. And so your brain is kind of almost doing this own tug of war with itself, right?
Exactly. But, I bet everyone on this call, the reason you joined is because attaching to a purpose really speaks to you. And that is engaging a different part of our brain. It's engaging a more emotional part. And that's in the subconscious. It's not at the forefront. That's why it's so hard too. Lauren, you and I were saying, we're like, sometimes this work feels so challenging. Well, that's why. It's
it feels like it's never ending. I think that's it. It's you're there's no tangible, like, oh, you completed it and you get a trophy, right? So okay, so let's go into this 3-step process of how you can even determine your purpose, because I understand, and then I've got some questions about, like, how to make sure that you've got that in your job, and then also how to find a new job that is going to use your purpose. So it's kind of like, how do you find it? And then the 2 scenarios of, like, using it in your day-to-day job right now or your new job, just to lay the groundwork. What heavy hitters are coming your way?
You might need to remind me of the follow-up questions. But okay, so take notes, everyone. These are the 3 steps. So the first is getting clear on your interests, right? All the stuff that you're passionate about, that's where your passion comes in. And again, just like write them down, whatever comes to mind. If it's cooking, write down cooking. That doesn't mean you're going to go be a chef. That doesn't mean that you're going to, like, have this crazy career that's not in line with anything you're doing. And really ask yourself, as you write down these interests, like, what is it? What do they give me? What do my interests give me? What are they providing for me? Like, how do they make me feel? What am I getting from them, right? So it's not about the interests, it's about what you're getting from them. That's the first step. The second step
part of that is not really that your interest is cooking. It's the fact we're going to later on be more focused on, like, what do you get from cooking? Got it. Okay. So, exactly. So even though you said earlier, purpose is not interest, it's like, yes, but we need that as part of one of the clues, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it tells you, like, one of our members, for example, she loves to cook. And what she gets from that is connection, right? So that's where the deeper stuff comes in, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about, like, food is the vehicle to connection, to give like an example. Yeah. The second piece is values, right? What do you stand for? What's that thing that makes you feel really charged? So just examples of values. Challenging the status quo has been, like, my number one value for the longest time. And, in terms of work bigger, like our values, diversity, creativity, because it drives problem solving, right? And you cannot reach your full potential unless you're coming from a creative place, not creativity in terms of art, creativity, problem solving. So again, thinking about, like, what are those things, those maybe, 5, start with 10, start broad, like, don't limit yourself right now. What are those things that you really connect to that really, that shape who you are and your belief system? Yeah. Right?
I was just going to ask you about beliefs, because the way I've done it, like, so for Career Contessa, we have an employee handbook that I made, and I put our values in there, but I also put our beliefs. And there's definitely they could have all fallen under, I guess, the same thing. In my book, Power Moves, which is out, by the way, I talk about my beliefs, like what I believe. And, like, one of the beliefs is, like, that change is always going to happen in your careers, right? Like, that's a belief. A value at Career Contessa is lifelong learning, which is really interesting, because I'm just thinking about, like, what were my interests before I was running Career Contessa, or even when I was a recruiter. And, like, learning is definitely, like, I guess, like, woven between everything, right? And in there. So it's, anyway, sometimes hindsight is helpful to also kind of try to go back and recognize the puzzle pieces.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. A lot of our values, like that's why it's really important to look back and look at your memories and even look at experiences that you've had, big experiences, life experiences, sometimes even like smaller just memories, right, that we hold on to. Like where learning shows up for you, Lauren, right? You've probably seen it throughout so many areas, and starting to identify those themes, that's a huge indicator of what
and energy. Like for me, I feel like when you're doing something that's related to your value, I'm really energized by it. So like I've always really enjoyed like learning something and then like tangibly applying it, you know? So
yeah.
Okay, so step 2 you said is values. Should we go over just, you said challenging the status quo. And if anybody who's joining live, let us know if you want to, you know, we can use you as also a live case study on this. Like, what are your values? What do you stand for? So Katie said, having my daughter shifted my career more than anything in a positive way. So yeah, maybe one of your values now is, Belma, I think you were talking about this earlier, is like family, right? Like, that can be a value, right? Like, and I also think that, or at least I think I kind of overthink a balance, right? I think sometimes I overthink this, and I think it has to be this like long, deep sentence. They can be words, they can be phrases, right? Like they don't have to be like, I don't know, that I guess like they don't have to be so overthought, you know?
Yeah, and we like the biggest thing in Work Bigger, all the members will tell you, I'm always like, done is better than perfect. Like, just get started. I'm sure you are all for that too, Lauren, right? Just like get it down on paper, just like that's it. That's all. Because then you're moving, you're taking action, you're moving forward, and you're not just in your head trying to unpack a big thing like values.
Yeah.
With another example, authenticity, right? So like feeling authentic, speaking authentically, that could be another value. Yeah, is another one.
I'm just looking at some of ours at Career Contest. I'm looking back at this document. One of ours is innovation and some fun. And then I kind of have this paragraph about like, we know that, what's that?
Fun. No, like that's that's an awesome one. Like, yeah.
Another one we had on here, and I'm not trying to read them all, just default to transparency. So like as a company, that's one of our values is like, you know, transparency and access to more information. So someone's asking if you can have more than 4 values. I mean, I guess, yeah, if you're making this list, what would you, is there a good number to stop at?
We usually do 5 in Work Bigger. Like when people do the course, it's 5 values. You can do 4, right? I'm not a big believer in like set rules. I think it's like really checking in with yourself. Is that enough to anchor you? Right? Yeah. Does that feel good for you? Is that enough to anchor your messaging and how you feel?
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Amazing. Okay, so number 1 is interest and how they make you feel. Number 2 is values. People are putting them in there. That's amazing. Thank you guys, because I think that helps a lot. And I'm one of those people, like I learn by example. So I'm very, and if anybody reads Power Moves, you'll notice that, because I'm like, yada, yada, yada. Here's an example of how that is in real life, because I'm very visual. Okay, and then step 3. What's step 3 in the framework?
Yeah. And then step 3 is strengths, identifying like how you add value in your most unique way. And there's a number of different ways to do that. You could take an assessment. We use the Strengths Finder. I'm a huge fan of the Strengths Finder because for me as a founder, it's really helped me see like where I tend to put most of my energy, right? Our strengths are also our greatest weaknesses because we love to live in our strengths and they tend to become overused. So I highly recommend the Strengths Finder. That's the assessment that we use at Work Bigger. Other ways to do it is to ask yourself, when do I feel most confident? That's one question to start with. And I think not enough of us do that because we're our own worst critics and we're living in our head and beating ourselves up a lot. So really taking some time and being like, when do I feel the most confident? That signifies that, you know, what you're doing, you feel really good about. And then also, you know, collecting feedback from other people and asking like, where do you see me adding the most value is an easy question to start with.
Just so you guys know, I linked in the chat, we had a webinar called How to Identify Your Strengths. And so if you want to like dive deeper into that, there's also that webinar, which free replay right now. And I know that they had also mentioned some free resources for strengths assessments, because I think StrengthsFinder you have to pay for, but there's, what Belma is basically saying is there's a lot of options out there too. You know, those are just some places to start. I took StrengthsFinder in college. That like blew my mind. But I also think that that's like good work for people to be doing like much earlier on. I think part of what for all of us is that we have to kind of reteach ourselves kind of things that, you know, we could have, if we had started in second grade, you know, things might be different. But we're doing the work now. What are some examples of strengths? Because I agree, like I think your strength is sort of where there's the overlap of like what gives you energy, but also what you're good at that's also required for your job. Because like I always say this, like you can be the world's best gardener, but if it's not required for your job, then that's a hobby, right? And so what's an example of a strength?
Yeah. So I'll use the StrengthsFinder example. So, and I love people also use it here as a value, empathy. Empathy is a strength, right? So like your ability to connect with other people, your ability to understand them, to basically, to just like connect with them in that deep way and understand how they're feeling. That's such a huge strength, because think about how you can use that, right? When it comes to the job interview, when you're interviewing with a company, you can be present and really understand what their needs are and put yourself in their shoes to understand their pain points, right? That's an example of a strength. Another one is strategic thinking, which is your ability to like just have a big picture in mind. And you can see like different paths forward, which is such a powerful tool. Another strength is, this is not what they call it in StrengthsFinder, but being a doer, essentially, right? Like somebody who's constantly taking action. We have a lot of doers in Work Bigger. That's why they tend to burn out, because they're like always on the go. They're like super achievers.
Yeah, I think a lot of high achievers, type A perfectionists, I think that at least in the work we're doing at Career Contested too, we get a lot of questions about that. And I think that there's always this, again, kind of this mental tug of war, because part of why you're successful is that you're able to do a lot, right? You get a lot done. And then like, you also have the flip side of that where you're like, because I'm a doer, I'm burnt out and I'm always putting myself last. So as someone said, balance, like, you know, we all know there's maybe no 50-50 in life. I think it's a lot. I think a lot of things also come down to self-awareness. And what's interesting right now is that I think there's more like pause and reflection time, self-awareness time, it feels like, at least right now. I don't know, people let me know in the chat if you're kind of feeling that way. And part of it is like, I used to spend 2+ hours commuting, right? Like that's just like, that was just like an everyday thing. I realize now, just sort of, it's not shocking that I wasn't pausing and reflecting as often as maybe I should have, because we were all doers, and we are all doers in our own way too, you know? So COVID contemplation, exactly. Okay, so Belma, so these are the 3 steps. I think these are really, and people are saying, oh, the last thing I wanted to talk about strengths is like so I agree. Like, I think taking one, and you're right. It's not called StrengthsFinder anymore. Now it's called Clifton Strengths. So FYI on that. One of the things that I think is interesting is someone said that their strength was harmony, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's so passive. But then their boss was like, no, this is actually a really good thing. So I think another thing for people to do is like, maybe you won't be able to answer all of this in one sitting, but maybe you can identify your strengths, and then you can see in the specific like projects or tasks or like specialties or like requests that you get, how is harmony then showing up? Because for me, I agree, harmony is a great strength, but maybe I have trouble communicating with myself where that fits into the workplace. So part of that's maybe just like taking the time to, like, when you are working on something, to see how did harmony play a role in this, right?
Yes, that's such a great example. And harmony, I believe, is a relationship building skill.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful, because somebody who has that strength probably is really good at creating the peace in the group and like diffusing conflict. So taking a step back and thinking about like, where am I exhibiting this strength? And it really is self-aware. It does require you to slow down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And take notes, write it down. Like while you're intentionally start the workday with today, I'm going to think about how harmony is showing up. Like where am I exhibiting these traits? And then just start to track that. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we did this framework. Now, 2 more questions, and I promise you guys we will get to the questions that you answered or you put in there. So the first question is, let's talk about how somebody's currently employed. Like someone said, they work in healthcare and they're busier than ever. They want to, even though they're at a job and they're employed, they're not looking for something new. They want to make sure that their values and their purpose is what they're attaching to, and not their job title. Like, how can they tangibly, or like, what can they do to make sure they're doing that in their day-to-day right now?
Yeah, so I think it starts with the job search, right? What company, so your values should essentially help you determine what company you work for, right? Do your values align with that of the organization? So when you're in the job search, it's going to help you weed out all of those companies that just aren't speaking to you. You're going to know what to say no to and what to say like, oh, I'm really excited about this. I'm going to pursue this. So first, just in the search, right? And like what you're filtering through.
How do you do that? Like, how do you filter through that? Because I feel like when people are job searching, most of the time they're just reading it. They're looking at a job description. Maybe the company has this like really amazing company page where they've listed out their values. Maybe. I think unfortunately that's still less than most. So how would you find that? I guess if you're on LinkedIn, let's just say you're on LinkedIn and you're job searching.
Okay, and I'll also add, they don't always uphold to their values, right? Like how many times do you hear people starting a job being like, I was so excited because the company culture on the website seemed awesome, and then I started and it's such a toxic place. So what I recommend in terms of the job search, your job search strategy and your process, apply online, like sure, focus on that if that helps. That's the low-hanging fruit. But at Work Bigger, I really stress building relationships and starting your search by having conversations with people, right? And sharing things like your values and your mission from the get-go, so you are transparent essentially about who you are and what you want, and asking very specific questions of like, what is your company culture like? Like what are some of the policies in the workplace? If like ageism is something that I hear comes up a lot. So having questions to like help weed that out. Like, what is the diversity of the company look like? What does the age diversity look like, right? As an example of ageism as a concern. So really starting with building relationships and having a process for that, right? And how you're going to leverage informational interviews to help you fill in some of the gaps. Because I see people are in different places. Like once you find your mission, you may know exactly what it is that you want to do because it's been in the back of your mind for some time and you just haven't had the space or giving yourself the time to come to terms with that because it's a scary change. I see other people that are like, okay, like I have my mission, but like the job role still feels so far away for me. Like what now? And I totally get that. So where I recommend starting is like outlining all of your knowledge gaps. There's something when you were looking for your mission or when you were doing that work, there's companies and job roles that are going to pop up that you're going to be curious about. So like start with where you're curious about, list all of like your knowledge gaps, the things that you don't know that you want to learn, and then go out there and start having conversations. And that's where I think community is so powerful because you're not like reaching out cold on LinkedIn. You're relying on a group of people who already have shared values, and they'll likely recommend for you opportunities that resonate. I think that's a big one. Like community is a huge tool.
Yeah, and we just had someone say in the comments, so anybody who's afraid to ask these questions in an interview process, they said that they're a senior corporate talent acquisition manager, and that's the #1 questions candidate asks, and I love it because it shows me they are really looking for a company that they'll fit in with. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like there is sort of this like fear sometimes around asking those kind of questions, but those are, we get asked a lot, like, how can I make sure that my next job, and by the way, you guys, I linked to this podcast episode I did with the now former head of inclusion and diversity at Pinterest, Candace Morgan, who talks a lot about finding a company that has value fit, not just culture fit. And I think she does a really nice way of describing that. So I think that these are all tools to give you kind of the language you need in order to ask and talk about this. Because I understand, like, at the end of the day, we need to be able to have a conversation about it, right? So, and if you're in a job right now, is this something where you could be sitting down with your boss today and be like, hey, we don't have values for our team. Can we sit down and draft up, like, what are the values of our team? Like, for me, I thought making, and we have a really small team, there's only 3 of us, right? But still making an employee handbook that started with sort of like, here's our beliefs, here's our values, here's what we stand for. And then the rest of the handbook is more like vacation days and, you know, healthcare, whatever, that kind of stuff. But my point being is, like, I actually found that to be really helpful for me as a leader, but I think also for them as a team. So, like, maybe that's a good place for people to start who are within companies right now.
That's awesome, Lauren. And I bet you that anchors so much of your decision making, right? In terms of like everything that you do about the business. And it's, you know, I think that work is so important. I think it's really missing in a lot of companies. And, you know, people have these values and they won't know what they are. And it's so sad, because I feel like that's the foundation that you need. Otherwise, you're making decisions from like this like stressed out place. And, you know, when you're dealing with all the stuff that comes up in the workplace, it's just not good.
Agreed. Okay, I want to leave time for people's questions. There's definitely some interesting conversation in the chat. I'm going to go to the questions because that's that's where the upvotes are. Okay. So Melanie said, what kind of questions can I ask during interviews to understand if a role, company, team aligns with my values and purpose? So maybe like, I know you kind of just said them, Belma, but can you repeat them since this is being recorded? Like, what are 3 questions to ask?
Can you repeat what are 3 questions to ask in an interview?
Ask during an interview to understand if a role, company / team aligns with my values and purpose.
Okay, aligns with values and purpose. Yeah, I mean, I think you can be really direct. Like, what does the company stand for, right? What are the top 5 values, and how do those help drive decision making for the team here? I think that's actually a really good one, because you can like bring it down to like the more tangible level and see how they're living them. And then think about like the specific issue that's relevant for you, right? If you're looking for a company, I've had ageism come up a few times with like Work Bigger readers, so I have that top of mind. But if ageism is a concern for you, right? What does the diversity of the team look like in terms of age, in terms of race, gender, all of that stuff, right? So incorporating that. What else?
I would also add that maybe something to say is like, here's my values. How are these reflected back on this very specific team also? So I think those are, 3 + 1, I guess that gives you 4 questions. And I think based on their answers, you will have a very natural dialogue about this. And as we said earlier, someone in the live chat who works in talent acquisition said that this is like probably the #1 question she gets asked. And like it's her favorite because it shows her that candidates are thinking about this. So Melanie, hopefully that is very helpful for you. Okay, the next question comes from Charlotte. She said, I consider myself a person with a lot of interest, but no one true passion. How do companies in specific fields, food, health, animals, automotive, view candidates like me who maybe have relative experience related to the job title, i.e. a marketing coordinator, but not direct experience in the field? So this sounds like more like a kind of like a job search question. Like, how do companies who have like a very specific, like we make cars, we are, General Motors and we make cars, how do they view candidates who have maybe similar experience, but it's like, it's not overly specific?
I heard a couple of things there. I got stuck on the like passion question, on the passion part, right? And I just wanted to say, remember, your passion is not your purpose. And it's like, what are you getting out of all these interests? So I got stuck there. I want to make sure it's okay to have multiple interests. How do companies use someone? I think it's in the storytelling, right? And how you share your story about what you do and how you connect the dots for them, right? What you do and what you care about. Again, like connecting on that values level is so important because it's foundational. And then in terms of the skills, focusing on impact, like the impact that you've made versus just the tasks. I think when we talk about tasks, it makes it really difficult for a company to understand how you can add value for them. But if you talk about like the bigger picture impact, they can really understand your skill set on a bigger level. Did I answer that question, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, just from like putting the recruiting hat on, it's about transferable skills. You know, I won't tell everyone this whole story over again, but like I got a job in recruiting, having never been a recruiter, but I had transferable skills. And I was able, I think the big part here is that you need to be able to articulate or communicate clearly and concisely why, as a marketing coordinator, yes, I have relevant skills that I can, you know, that are transferable to here, and like why you're interested. I think the why, like find your why and be able to describe your why, like why a food company, why a health company. That I think is the most important part of this question. So, okay. Next one comes from Danielle. She said, I'm at a job right now where I feel indifferent. I'm great at my job, but I don't have any passion for it. This is something I've been dealing with for many years. I've switched careers often, trying to find enjoyment in work. Since I don't know yet what is meaningful work for me, I usually pick the job title with the biggest salary. Is it possible to find a fulfilling career when you don't know what you're passionate about? If so, how? There's a lot in that question.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I'm hearing you're picking the job based, it's almost like it's happening to you, right? Like you're picking the opportunity that's there. Salary sounds great, like it'll, you know, support your lifestyle, but it's not checking off that like fulfillment box. So I recommend going through, going through that 3-step process that we talked about. And did I hear in there, like, I don't know what my passion is? Is that?
Yeah, so she said that she's switched careers often, trying to find enjoyment. It's not working. So at this point, she's just, you know, picking the one with the highest salary. And then she said, is it possible to find a fulfilling career when you don't know what you're passionate about?
Yeah. But you have to do the work, right? You have to slow down and really give yourself some space and time to think through these bigger questions that I shared here. Lauren, is it okay if I share the workbook with everyone here?
Yeah. Let me pull that out. The Work Bigger workbook. I'm gonna put it over here in the live chat, you guys.
Yeah. So when we did the last webinar, I created a workbook for everyone that was really like helping you dive into finding your mission immediately. But then I wanted to change it up a little bit, which is this new workbook that I put together for you all. And this is going to help you take a step back, because I'm curious with who asked this question, right? It could be that you're struggling to find your passion. It could be there's something else getting in your way that's blocking you. It could be a mindset issue, right? Or it could be something else. So it's really important to first take a step back and think about, like, what's got me feeling really stuck right now? Is it that I don't know my passion, right? Or is it something bigger? So, like, please download that and work through that. It's going to help you to slow down. I really think that's what's needed here when we are going from job to job and we're kind of in this cycle. Like, I was in that cycle. I was going from job to job, making more money in each one, but I was like, it's not working. Like, I need to get out of this. I need to do something different. So, like, try something different, right? Do something different. So this workbook will just help you start to assess your current situation, right? Where you're feeling stuck. And then I recommend resources to start tackling finding your mission. We have so many on the Work Bigger blog. It's at workbigger.co. And then I have a ton of resources just for mindset piece, because they're very integrated. You cannot find your purpose without also working on your mindset and understanding what some of those things that are holding you back. Maybe it's lack of confidence. Maybe it's burnout. Like I see people who are just going from job to job, they're exhausted and they're not taking that time to slow down and think about these hard questions that we're asking here. Like, what are your values? That's not something you can just like sit down and write. You need to give yourself some time.
Yeah, I was just going to add on for Danielle on this question that like, I totally hear you on this. And what I think is that we expect a lot out of careers. And so part of that is also a shift in expectations around like, your career isn't going to fill every single box for you, but determining your wants and your needs, and then kind of looking at this as like, passion is one of those things where it's like a flame. It can go out. You can be passionate and have moments of passion in your career, like multiple times a day. If you're able to kind of capture those, I think we also need to rethink passion as like this thing that just like flows constantly through versus like moments of passion, moments of fulfillment. And but start with the workbook. I think that's a really, really good place to start. It's a big question, and I think it's a question a lot of us have. I know I think about this a lot, and what I guess always come back to, it's sort of like, this is success and fulfillment. They're not like these one spots that you just sit in, right? Like we are always evolving. We are always growing. Like we always are moving. And so like, we might have those moments, but it's this like finding joy in the process of like not having that all the time, but having moments of that, I guess. So anyway, okay. So Charlotte wrote a really good answer. Oh no, you just said you're in the same boat. Okay, so Danielle had another question and said, I'm trying to decide on a higher level degree, master's or doctorate, for a potential career path. I have so many interests and want to feel like I'm making an impact in the community. I'm struggling so much to narrow down a degree. Any suggestions?
Yeah. I'm curious, like what would each degree get you? So I bet you you're struggling with that question because there's like a bigger anchor missing, right? So my question there is, yeah, what would each degree get you in terms of like just listing like the pros and cons, and like where do you see yourself after you finish each degree, each one, right? If you were to like outweigh the two, I'm just thinking about like it's important to really get clear on your intention behind each degree and what you want to get out of it, because I see when that's missing, it goes back to what you just said about expectations, Lauren, right? The expectations when you graduate or when you finish the degree may mismatch with the reality. So just think about so do you have anything to add there? Does that help?
I mean, someone wrote and said like they're in the same boat. They have a bachelor's and a master's in writing because I'm a good writer, but I don't necessarily love to write. I figured it'd be a good thing to obtain because writing is a valuable skill, which it is. Recently, I found a company that I would die to work for, but their field is food and health. It's so specific that I'm afraid my lack of experience in that field will make them not want to hire me. So I've been looking into obtaining a certificate in nutrition and health lifestyle, but it's around $6,000. It's hard to justify, especially during times like these. I think for both of the people in that, what I think is better than me trying to give some general advice is like, Charlotte, you should go find someone who works at the company and understand like, does having that extra degree, like how important is that to the company? Or can you like truly do your own self-studies and learn so much about this without having to get a certificate? Danielle, I think another thing for you is like, maybe find people who have that you think are in the careers or you find their careers interesting and ask them about that, because some industries you definitely need to have advanced degrees. Some industries it's much more about experience, and like for you, since you have a lot of interest, maybe taking on a job and then like volunteering in something else would be good. I always I guess I'm very cautious about telling people like, yeah, go get that degree, because I think especially right now, I think we're seeing this big shift in the fact that like education is changing, and that, for me, I feel like unless you know why you're getting the degree and you've got this kind of like clear North Star, you can very quickly fall into the expectation trap of, I paid a lot of money to get this degree thinking it would yield me this result. And that is not a promise. Like that is something they sell in the advertisement, but that is like, they're not going to go to work every day after the degree you are. So I would definitely.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I also just heard some fear in there. Like if I don't get this, I'm afraid that they're not going to hire me or that I don't have enough experience. And just be careful with making big decisions like this around investing in something out of fear, because you're afraid if you don't do it, it's not going to work out. That's actually like, that's a sign that you should like pause. And I love what you said, Lauren, about go and ask, like go and have a conversation. Give you the answer.
Okay, next question comes from Jasmine, who said, as someone who has been repeatedly taken roles that I'm not great at nor awful at, what are some tips that I can use as I navigate searching for a fulfilling career and not just a job that leads nowhere? Okay, so she's had jobs that like she's not amazing at, she's not the worst at, kind of like the other one where it's like, I'm maybe indifferent about this. How can I navigate searching for a fulfilling career and not just another job? I mean, I think it goes back to also doing this work to find your purpose, right? Or defining your purpose.
Yes, and I'm hearing specifically strengths, because if you're like, we have a need to exercise our strengths in the workplace. Like if you're not doing something that you feel you're great at, that's going to impact your motivation, that's going to impact your confidence, it's going to impact like how you are approaching different career opportunities. So first, like work on the strengths piece. I'm hearing that would really benefit you. Like the strengths finder, if you just do the top 5, is $20. So you can, go do it on your own. Or again, survey people, asking them like, how do I add value? Asking yourself when you feel you're most confident. That sounds like the most important. And then you can start to like weed out the job roles, because your strength should guide the job role that you pursue. To tie to that. And then you may not be, for example, strategic thinking is really helpful with like marketing positions, right? If you have to plan like a bigger marketing, just giving general examples here, but it should be able to guide you in like the job role specifically.
Yeah. I would also say, Jasmine, like one of the things that like, if I can default to, okay, what makes a job fulfilling? I think sometimes being really good at something. So also maybe think about what are you really good at? Maybe take out the whole passion and love and, those emotions, and just think about like, what am I really good at? Like, I know at the end of the day, I'm really organized and I'm really good at, certain project management skills. Maybe I wouldn't love doing that, but like, maybe I could just start by having a job that I'm really good at. And like, my example of this is when I got my job at recruiting, I didn't love every part of recruiting, but I was really good at it. And that kind of made me love it, which made me more engaged, which increased my confidence. And like, I always find these to be a little bit of a domino effect. So that's another place to start as well. Okay, let's take done answering. Okay. Anne said, how can I get around ageism? It's a good question.
Yeah, so I talked about that briefly, right? Because I actually got that email from one of our readers. Can you ask it again? What exactly? I'm curious what her language was.
She said, how can I get around ageism?
Yeah, that's where it's really important to have those conversations with people around their culture, their values, and also looking at like how diverse is their company in terms of age. Ageism is, it's real, right? It's a real bias that exists in the workplace. And it's something that like I've been thinking about more and more as I get these questions. But yeah, I think start to dig deep to understand. You don't waste your time applying to the companies that are ageist, right? And have that bias. So seeing if, is there anyone at the company that you can connect with, that you can get some insight into like what their policies are, and what their employee like demographic looks like.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, I think, there's a lot of hiring bias, absolutely. I would also recommend going the route of trying to network with somebody within a company first. My mom got, a job, not for the first time, but like her first like real job, I guess that's what she calls it, not my words, her words, when she was 55, right? And it was a field that she didn't actually have a huge interest in, but she was like very eager to work in an office space and kind of have not like a retail job, but like what she calls her real job. And one of the things I feel like for the ageism, it actually also worked in her favor because that company and it had a lot of young people who had like only stayed a year and they left too quickly. And so I remember working with her to be like, here's how you can, describe your experience in a way that actually makes your age a positive, not a negative, even though that already should be it. The other thing is that company did have a lot of employees who had worked there for many years. There were people her age that worked there. And then lastly, she got the job interview from a networking connection. So that person was able to vouch for her, and the other thing I will say is that my mom went out of her way to take extra, like she took Excel and some other, like whatever the stereotype about tech is, she's gone out of her way to make sure that she, I guess, like had that skill set. And then I think within the workplace, she's just, again, this isn't something that just changes overnight, but I know for her, one of the things has been like asking a lot of questions, right? And being kind of like leaning into that lifelong learning piece of it. So, I mean, I think, isms of any kind are extremely hard. There are stereotypes, there's discrimination, there's hiring bias. And so I don't want to make this sound like it's easy. I think this is actually kind of a whole topic we should talk about, but I can only speak from that experience that I think that was one of the things that helped her, if that's any consolation in the advice. Like I said, there are people who are experts on this, and we can definitely look for someone to talk about that. But I think at the end of the day, for companies, every company is unique and different. So there's no like blanket statement of how to do this other than kind of what Belma said about picking the right place, researching, networking. Like it kind of always comes back to that, I think.
Can I also share, Lauren, one question that came up for me? I think about this a lot. Something to ask in an informational interview. Just write this down if it's helpful. Like asking, what are some of the challenges someone like me would face in this position, and just see how they answer. Right? Again, like read their energy. See what comes up, because stuff might come up like in the language and again, and how they respond. What are some of the challenges someone like me would face in this position?
Yeah,
so
just I like that a lot. That's a good question. Okay, let's take one more question. So this came from Aaliyah, and it says, she said, what if I find an organization that fulfills the purpose component, but I don't know about the management style during the interview process? I have worked in positions where I'm doing something where the purpose aligns with mine, but the team did not trust the management or think they did a good job of leading. We didn't actually talk about leadership, but yeah, leadership and how that leads to your purpose.
Yeah, so if there's issues in management style, what comes up for me is like, what are the conversations they're having around feedback, right? Like, how are employees being trained? That's a really good thing to understand, actually, like asking them, what learning and development do you have in place? Like, how do you train your managers? That's where communication comes in, right? And that's like when you talk about management style, and what's falling short is probably more of those skills-based training. So they might have the training around the purpose and the values and all of that, but then they're missing the skills component, which is so important, right? You got the foundation, and then you got to execute it.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding like what does training look like here? What is how do you support professional development at this organization? That's what's coming up for me with that question.
Yeah. I think also management style is an interesting phrase because I think that that's something that can change and they can learn. And so, yeah, I think it goes kind of back to asking questions around like, what are the efforts around development, learning, executing on that? What kind of feedback is there a natural feedback loop that's happening, or is there feedback only given once a year? That's something that I would definitely, ask those questions if you're interviewing, great. And if not, maybe those are things that you can start to bring up with your manager, like, and as a kind of like, as a positive of like, look, I think this is a really, especially with the state of the world, like, I think this is a really interesting time for them to also stop and pause and think about their management style. So, yeah, you're in the interview process. So the questions we gave you are what I would start with, just because you're in the interview process. And remember, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So that's a really good question. I think leadership and management styles are incredibly important. And the hard part about this is that managing people it's an extremely unique skill set that is always changing. It's not like Excel where you master, Excel shortcuts and then you know what I mean? Like every day it's new, it's different, and I think it requires a lot of like going with leaning into like who you are also, you know what I mean?
And taking some risk too. Like the thought of having a feedback conversation is so scary. It's like give feedback than to receive it. And it requires, that's like risk taking, going back to what we talked about when we first jumped on this call. Yeah. Being able to get uncomfortable is huge with improving your own leadership and management style.
I mean, isn't that what we're hearing right now? Like the constant message is listen, learn, be willing to be uncomfortable, be willing to do the work, be willing to change your opinion on something. Like that is growth. You know what I mean? So anyway, we'll leave it on that because I want to be respectful of time. But Belma, thank you so much for coming on today's webinar. Everybody, I'm going to send you the replay. I'll send you Belma's workbook so you can use that. Check out her website, Work Bigger. I'll put all this in the links when I'm done talking for a second. And then also Belma was nice enough to be on our podcast episode yesterday teaching this as well. So you have 2 audio formats for listening to this. Remember that all of our webinars right now are free. So you can go watch Belma's last webinar, that strengths webinar, and really dedicate to this. So Belma, thank you so much. We are all thankful for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody who asked amazing questions. And, I didn't get to read all the comments in the chat, but just so grateful for all of your time and for being present today.
Amazing. All right, guys. See you next week at the next webinar, which is coming out soon for the announcement. Bye.
All right. Bye.